The Apostle Paul says he does not set aside the grace of God. What does he mean by that? First, let's be honest that God's enemy counterfeits all God's ways to confuse us into trusting ourselves instead of Christ. Second, let's be honest that we sometimes get confused. Third, let's be honest that all God's ways are perfect and righteous. This third point reveals our confusion about grace. Since grace is one of God's ways, grace must be perfect and righteous. So when you think of grace, do you think of perfect righteousness? Or has the enemy confused you with his counterfeit that grace is some form of leniency, of God going easy on someone by lowering standards? Since grace is righteous, it must include perfect moral standards, which are the fullness of God's law. It also must include the full weight of God's judgment on sin. Jesus lived a perfect life and died to put away all sin by the sacrifice of himself. That means Jesus carried the full weight of God's law and died to trade his righteousness for our unrighteousness. This substitution of Christ is the big surprise in grace. Substitution means grace is the life of Christ, the presence of Christ by his Spirit, the Spirit of life, the Spirit of righteousness. Grace is not just a get-out-of-jail-free card, as some think. Grace is a whole new way of life with a vision of substitution as the inspiration and power to love others. When you think grace, do you think substitution? Jesus taking your place to show you God's standard as well as the cost of your freedom? Let's revisit Paul's declaration that he never sets aside the grace of God. Paul means he never sets aside the substitution of Christ as the only tool he needs and uses for life. He wrote those words to confused Christians who had been justified by faith in Christ alone, justified by grace alone, by substitution alone. But they had been pressured to set aside substitution and focus on what they needed to do to live a justified life. In all human experiences, there are only two motivations for life. One is the substitution of Christ fulfilling perfect law perfectly. A vision of that moves you to act with all God's effort. The other is some form of leniency where some unfulfilled law, duty, or obligation is in your vision, turning you inward to focus on what you need to do and pressing you to act from self-effort. Why not renew your mind by thanking God often that grace is the substitution of Christ? Mormons need you to do that so that you learn not to set aside grace when you converse with them. This is critical because they know nothing of grace as substitution, only grace as leniency. Naturally, then, they will pressure you to set aside substitution and join them in not considering it. I lead Mormons to bring Jesus into the conversation to measure by his perfection and thus taste grace's substitution. This surprises and delights them. Watch my 5-minute videos to see how I do it.